Welcome to today's Explainer. We're coming out of the gate swinging today with a truly fascinating mystery. We're going to unpack some profound ancient texts that suggest there are unseen realities actively affecting every single human life. If you've ever wondered why human history is so completely obsessed with the concept of an invisible world, well, you are definitely in the right place. Get ready, because the source material we are uncovering today might just completely change how you view your entire life.
So let me just ask you a question to instantly kick things off. Have you ever felt that there's just more to reality than what you can see with your physical eyes? Think about those super highly charged moments in your life. Have you ever sensed that something completely beyond the natural world was actively influencing events? Right there, behind the scenes. It's a feeling almost everyone has had at least once, right? And it really makes us wonder what is actually going on beneath the surface.
Now, let's take that gut feeling a step further. What if the spirit realm isn't just some abstract religious idea or a concept reserved for mystics sitting on a mountain? What if it's a literal, daily reality that affects every human life every single day, whether they recognize it or not? Our source texts argue exactly that some of the absolute most critical truths about our reality are playing out invisibly. Okay, let's dive into this.
Phase 1. Proximity and perception. We really need to rethink where the unseen world actually is. Right off the bat, our source reveals this staggering point, framing it as Truth 10. The unseen realm isn't some distant galaxy reserved for super spiritual people. No, it is right here, and it is already affecting your choices, your beliefs, and your destiny. Whether it's acknowledged or not, this text argues that this invisible dimension is actively influencing how you think, how you love, and how you grow on a daily basis. Which brings us to Truth 1, highlighted by a beautiful quote derived from the biblical accounts of figures like Jacob or Elisha's servant. When Elisha's servant was absolutely panicking because they were surrounded by an enemy army, his eyes were suddenly opened to see heavenly forces that were already there. The physical reality didn't change, only his perception did. As the text points out many times, the greatest limitation is not distance, it's awareness. The heavenly forces were allegedly already present. We just have to open our eyes to the idea that the spirit realm is far more active and way closer than we realize.
And that perfectly sets up Truth 2. Look, as humans, we naturally evaluate everything based on appearances, right? We look at visible events and assume, yep, that's the whole story. But appearances rarely tell the complete truth. Visible events constantly have invisible dimensions. A simple, quiet act of obedience or a deeply private decision often acts as a massive trigger launching invisible consequences that can actually impact generations. The reality is always deeper than what we see.
Phase 2. Invisible battles and your words. Let's move inward and look at where the most crucial spiritual warfare actually takes place. When people hear a phrase like spiritual warfare, they usually picture something out of a movie, dramatic, supernatural showdowns. But the source material outlines Truth 3. The greatest battles are overwhelmingly invisible, fought right there on your inner battleground. It is a rapid-fire conflict. Faith versus fear, truth versus deception, hope versus despair, obedience versus compromise. Long before your external circumstances ever shift, the real dramatic battles are happening internally, in your thoughts and your convictions.
So, how do we fight those inner battles? Well, Truth 5 argues, through your words. It is so incredibly easy to underestimate our words. But while they might seem ordinary, words have literally built nations and broken hearts. They carry immense spiritual influence. The language you consistently speak out loud is a direct revelation of the beliefs you hold inside. And according to our source, those words actively shape the entire direction of your life.
Phase 3. Principles and true spiritual authority. Now, what's really interesting about this next slide is how it explores the actual mechanics governing the unseen world.
A massive misconception that this text absolutely shatters is the idea that the spirit world is just random, chaotic magic. Truth 4 explains that it actually operates on strict, predictable principles, exactly like the physical law of gravity. Specific spiritual actions yield specific spiritual results. Faith produces designated results. Truth consistently creates freedom. On the flip side, deception consistently creates bondage. When you realize this isn't random, you gain a massive advantage.
So how do you actually navigate those principles? It all comes down to Truth 7, which introduces a vital core concept, authority. The text defines authority simply as the legal right to act. And it points out a real tragedy here. So many people waste their entire lives frantically searching for more power, when what they really should be seeking is authority. Understanding the difference between these two is absolutely crucial.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. Think about physical strength, that's power, versus a police badge, which is authority. A police officer doesn't step out into a busy intersection and stop a speeding truck using physical muscle. No way. They stop traffic because the authority behind the badge gives legal backing to their command. The text outlines that spiritual victories work the exact same way. They don't come from forcing things. They come from confidently understanding your identity and your legal spiritual position.
Which brings us to Truth 8. The source posits that whatever receives your attention eventually shapes your life. The spirit realm essentially responds to your attention. If you focus heavily on fear or bitterness, those things will grow. But if you focus your attention on truth and on God's presence, that focus will completely transform your perspective. You literally become what you consistently pursue.
Phase 4. The ultimate spiritual reality. This brings us to the final and most profound phase of our explainer.
Truth 6 tackles what might be the greatest barrier to this ultimate reality. The text contrasts what it calls the enemy's lie with God's view. The lie desperately wants to convince you that your current circumstances dictate your identity, that if you make a mistake, you're forever disqualified. But the text reveals that God sees things entirely differently. Where others just see problems, the Creator sees purpose and destiny. Your current visible situation is not your final reality.
And that paves the way for Truth 9, which honestly might be the most surprising revelation of all. When people first discover the spirit realm, they almost always get caught up in this deep fascination with angels, demons, and hidden mystical knowledge. But the text argues the greatest mystery isn't an obsession with unseen supernatural beings. The real discovery is intimacy with the Creator. It's about knowing God more deeply, rather than just collecting supernatural trivia.
Which leads us to the absolute climax of today's explainer. Not information, but transformation. The ultimate goal of understanding these spiritual mechanics isn't just to make you smarter. The source argues that it's to pursue a transformative, active relationship with a Creator who is incredibly involved in your everyday life. Life isn't just physical. We are wired for meaning. The visible world is only part of the story. Once you learn to look beyond the appearances, you begin to see life from an entirely different, incredibly purposeful perspective. I'd love to invite you to adopt this powerful final thought, Lord, help me see beyond the visible, as a starting point to shift your own perspective. So let me leave you with this provocative question to ponder today. If the unseen realm truly responds to your focus, what invisible reality are you creating right now? Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.